assignments, doubts, exams. We have got you back. EduPlanner make every chapter easy to understand. Stay tuned, learn more, grow with us.
In this example, we have a conductive loop of wire here in a uniform magnetic field, and we're going to change the strength of the field over time at a rate of 0.783 teslas per second. And what we want to know is what is the strength of the induced magnetic field at the center of this loop of wire, given that we know all this information about the problem. So we have the internal resistance of the wire, the radius of the loop, the number of turns in the loop, and then just the change in the field strength over time. So this change in the field strength is going to correspond to a change in flux. Specifically, flux will increase, and because of that, we'll have a induced EMF and correspondingly an induced current. And from that induced current, we know we'll be able to calculate the magnetic field. If you remember, for a loop of wire, the strength of the magnetic field at the center of the wire is going to be, at the center of the loop, is going to be N times mu naught, the permeability of free space, times the current divided by 2 times the radius. So if we're able to get our induced current here, we'll be able to calculate B. So to get the induced current, we're going to start with Faraday's law of induction, which states that the change in flux over the change in time is equal to the induced EMF. And once we have the induced EMF, we can use Ohm's law to calculate the induced current. So for our induced EMF here, the change in flux is just going to be the change in our expression for the flux, which is going to be B times A times the cosine of the angle between the magnetic field and the surface normal, which in this case, they are parallel, so the angle is 0, and the cosine of 0 is just 1. So we can ignore that. So we're just looking at the change in B times A. And since the area is constant during this whole time, we're really just looking at the area times the change in the magnetic field. Now, of course, for our loop here, we actually have 105 coils, and we only calculated the change in flux for a single coil. So really, we're going to have to tag on an extra N here for each coil. So we'll try to squeeze it in. Okay. So now we have that the change in flux is N times A times delta B. So we should have that the induced EMF is minus N times A times delta B over delta T. Okay. So we have the number of loops. We almost have the area, right? We don't have it exactly, but we know that this is a circular loop, and that for a circle, the area is just going to be pi r squared. So again, we can substitute out for A here with pi r squared, and we'll have N times pi r squared times delta B over delta T. Okay, so now we have R, and we have delta B over delta T. So we will be able to calculate what this value is. And we really only care about what the magnitude of the induced EMF is. So we can just go ahead and ignore the sign here. So we'll just say the magnitude of the induced EMF is equal to N pi r squared times delta B over delta T. And if we plug in all of those values, we will find that the induced EMF is 0.413 volts. Okay. So now that we have our induced EMF, we can use Ohm's law, V equals IR, where in our case, our voltage is just our induced EMF, E. We know the resistance, and we know the induced EMF, so we can just solve for I. So we'll divide both sides by R. We'll have that induced EMF over R is equal to the induced current. So if we plug in our value for the resistance and 0.413 for our induced EMF, we'll get that the induced current is equal to 0.8604 amps. This is kind of an intermediate result. And now we're just about ready for the grand finale. If we write down our expression again for the strength of the magnetic field at the center of a loop of wire with a current going through it, it's N times mu naught I over twice R, where our constant mu naught, the permeability of free space, is just 4 pi times 10 to the minus 7th Teslas times meters over amps, just in case you forgot. And we plug in all of our values here. Nothing needs to be converted or anything. They're already in the right units. We will get that the strength of our magnetic field is 1.42 times 10 to the minus 3 amperes. So there you have it. We calculated the strength of the magnetic field at the center of a loop of wire with a current going through it, where that current was induced by changing the magnetic field in the region of our loop of wire.